Most of us live most of the time by self-propulsion. We push ourselves forward. We are rugged individualists. We've been taught to be like that. In many ways, that's an excellent philosophy and one I subscribe to. The problem comes when you've got a problem you can't fix. Hammering away at it with your willpower isn't going to work. There are limits to your will. And this is precisely where Nietzsche, for example, was wrong. Nietzsche was right in his diagnosis of society, I think, that as we lost God or spiritual beliefs, and you could say a number of other things like extended family systems and so on, we'd become nihilistic. And clearly, the rise of secular religions that are very similar to Christianity in their puritanical nature, and on the other hand, addictions in their total devotion to a sacrament or a communion, clearly these are somewhat a substitute for no longer having something that is highly salient in our lives. In other words, of the utmost importance, which is what entire neurochemical systems like the brain's dopamine system has evolved to facilitate. So clearly Nietzsche was right that in a modern society, in Emile, Durkheim and Carl Jung and other thinkers sort of picked up on this, in a secular world, if you like, we would find, I think Nietzsche literally called them new sacred games, new holy pursuits, new important things, new gods. What he was wrong about was in the prescription, what we should do about that. So Nietzsche famously sort of prescribed the Superman, the Übermensch, as the solution for this. A man who himself became God, you know, a sort of, almost, it was like a warrior poet or something in Nietzsche's sort of romantic world. It would be almost like a samurai, something like that, you know, could recite poetry and do beautiful writings as well as being a great warrior, and just could do everything, knew everything, was a god, you know. Well, I've never met one of those, neither of you, and I don't suppose we ever will, because they don't exist. So step 3 of the 12-step programs is kind of the real remedy, I'm going to suggest. And it works for everyone. It doesn't just work for addicts. And I think we're desperately in need of this. It is the exact opposite prescription from what Nietzsche gave. So Nietzsche said, we've become nihilistic because God is dead. The prescription is to become men gods. Not long after, the 12-step programs came about and were formed, just pre-war. So Nietzsche was writing right at the end of the 19th century. And by the 1930s, an opposite movement was coming about, saying, no. We can't be God. We've got things like rampant addictions and rampant sort of social justice movements, even back then, precisely because we don't have formal religions anymore, or at least not, it doesn't hold as much sway, not individually and not societally. Therefore, we need to acknowledge the fact that our addictive behavior, particularly in the case of very serious addicts, is in itself, in a sense, a religious pursuit. It's a new religion. And therefore, it's a search for a higher power. The drug is a lower power, of course. Anyone can see that. But it is an entheogen. It is an attempt to see God. Therefore, if that's what we're trying to do, then the only real replacement for it is something like a real God. So even though 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous did not prescribe specific beliefs in God, or that you must be religious, or that you must do this or do that, they did invite the recovering addict and alcoholic very seriously to investigate what God meant to them. So the precise wording of step 3 is, turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Right, so I'm going to suggest, as I have done in every video in this series, 12 steps for everyone. Obviously the clue's in the title. I want to try and explore if the 12 steps are useful for everybody, because I think they are. I think formal religion is bouncing off people a bit. They know they need something like that right now, or a lot of people are thinking that. But when they go in a church, a temple, mosque, whatever it is, because they're modern people, Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, it's not quite cutting it. But they know they need to develop a spiritual dimension to their lives, put it that way. Right, so I think this fits really, really well because it's non-denominational and non-sectarian. The only other thing I can think that's really flown like this has been mindfulness, and the reason, I think mindfulness is largely trendy bullshit, and I'll do another. The real mindfulness is forest tradition Thai Buddhism, which is totally legit, and I'll do a video on that. But the mindfulness craze is kind of toothless. It's like Buddhism without the balls, basically. And I'll do a video on that. But I think that something like this, something like 12 steps for everyone, is probably a better fit. It's non-sectarian, but it does help you to diagnose a problem in your life. Step 1, problem I cannot fix. For addicts, and obviously it's their drug of choice. For somebody else, it might be loss of a loved one, their business has collapsed, their career hasn't taken off, they're in their 20s, they're failing to launch, they can't find their feet, they can't find meaning and purpose. This problem, after a while you realize this is a mountain I can't climb. This is a problem I cannot fix. Correct. There are such problems. Admit it. It's a dichotomy of control. You need to work out things you can actually change, things you can't. So our step 1 video invited the question, what am I currently accepting that I should be changing? Because there are certain things that we're fakely accepting, but in fact they are fully under our control actually, and we can change them and we should do so. Get off our backsides and change it. But then there are other things that we're currently trying to change that just cannot be changed. They're beyond our control and we need to accept them. And once we've accepted that we can't do it, that doesn't mean we roll over and give up on it, but we accept that we can't do it. That takes you to step 2, where you look for a higher power and you're asked, do I believe even that this higher power will help me find a solution to this entrenched problem that I cannot fix? Because if the answer is no, I don't believe it, well then it can't happen. And we investigated how belief is a lighthouse. It never turns off. You either believe in a higher power or you believe in a lower power, but you're believing in something. And the 12-step way is to find the higher power. Find something that has power. It can be human, if you like. It can be a divine power, if you like. It can be theistic, it can be non-theistic, but whatever it is, it needs to have the power to solve your problems. Find it. And on finding it, you start to approach a more truthful and less delusory way of looking at the world, and you start to potentially get a solution to this problem you thought you couldn't fix. Now in step 3, we're at the absolute crunch. We're at the edge of the cliff. It's time to jump off and do that incredible dive into the surf. It's like the biggest trust exercise ever. It's like one of those things where you jump and your friends are going to catch you type of thing. So we're going to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand him. So I've known all sorts of people with all sorts of conceptions of God, obviously being in and around the recovery world. For a lot of people these days, it's stuff like nature, the universe. They believe there's some sort of force at large. For other people, it's the group. It's the group of recovering addicts. It's their extended family that they know have got their best interests at heart. It's the council of elders. It's something that's got more power than they do. But at some point you do have to start to investigate, is there a force that I can turn over my petty wants and designs to? I think that's really the spirit of this step. Can I turn over my little petty wants and needs to a greater purpose? And if I can, counterintuitively then, I'm going to get stuff I couldn't even imagine because it's so good. So the classic example I always give here, most people do not want to do this. They do not want to do this. It's a bit like that biblical passage where Abraham is asked to sacrifice his son, and which obviously is the ultimate sacrifice, and he gets halfway through it and God stays his hand and says, you don't actually have to do that, and delivers him a result. That is kind of the level, especially when you're an addict, that kind of is the level of preparedness around sacrifice that you need to have. Like, if this force, if the world, if the universe, if other people asked of me to go and serve over here doing this job that I don't particularly want to do, and that to do that I had to give up my own petty wants and needs, my own career in music or the media or whatever, and I come over here to work with these kids that are dying that need me, would I do it? And of course all of us would go, God, really? Do I really have to give up what I want to do? But when you do, you wind up doing what you really should be doing. So it's that kind of sacrifice is required here. And in particular, the word will refers to our thoughts, I think, the things I think, and our life, in the wording of the step, refers to our actions. So am I prepared to turn my thinking and my actions over to the care of a greater force than me, than just me and my own life? And if I am, then I will be expanded. And if I'm not, I will stagnate and go inwards. And I will fail to resolve the problems. Problems that I cannot fix will remain unfixed. Whereas this step 3 is inviting you to step into a spiritual universe, to develop a spiritual dimension to your life, and promising that if you do, you'll be expanded. We turned our will and our lives, our thoughts and our actions over to the care of a higher power, of God as I understand him. So for me, that would be something like, there is meaning in the world. I couldn't take it much further than that. I believe I'm here to do certain things, and there's a force at large, a little bit like the Tao in Chinese philosophy is kind of how I see it. Nature. Nature is going a certain way. The world is going a certain way. I've got a place in it. There's a natural life cycle here. I'm going to rise, I'm going to do stuff, I'm going to fall away, I'm going to die. I can play my part. I can get up on the wave and surf it, or I can fight against it. And so something like that, something like a turning over is usually the phrase that's used. We turn over our life to this force, and then we'll really find our meaning and purpose. So it's an odd one. It's a difficult concept to grab, especially when you're not desperate. And this is the advantage of being an addict as opposed to being an ordinary person, is that alcohol and drugs are the great persuader, right? They beat you into a sense of reasonableness where you really get this step. You really understand what it means to throw everything onto the altar in return for a more meaningful direction that's then handed back to you. So when you hand over everything, including all the things you want, what you'll get back from life is something much more profound. You know, the absence of which is the whole problem of modern society, and the solution for which historically was always something like religious belief or God systems or, cultural belief systems that kept us going in a certain direction, very, very sure of going in a certain direction. We've all seen the power of belief in people who have religious belief, whether it be sublime or diabolical. They are unafraid. So that's the kind of power that you can hook into when you're prepared to hand over your will and your life to the direction of something that's greater than you, and not, as we started out in this video, to remain under self-propulsion, which is the modern obsession, the secular obsession. This is what we're all taught, is we're just going forwards in our lives and in our careers. We're largely pursuing selfish goals. That's normal. And to a certain extent it is, but that's normal. That's all you should really do. Unless something exceptional happens, like a war, you should really be just paying attention to yourself, keep your head down, fix everything for you and your family. The problem with that is, as even Christ said it in the Bible, even the worst criminal loves his own kids. And it's easy to see the selfishness in just perpetuating your own genes and making sure that they're well taken care of. It's very you-focused, isn't it? And it is unlikely that you will resolve your nagging psychological, psycho-spiritual issues, your drug addictions, your pathologically hopeless relationships, your failed businesses or creative pursuits. All of those things will fail anyway, most of the time, unless you can widen your belief system and recruit the help of a higher power. Okay, so it's a very difficult step, really, step 3, to understand. I can't really explain it much better than that. I suspect people who are really in a jam, they've really got their back up against the wall, will understand exactly what I'm talking about. And people who don't have such a gift of desperation might struggle. It might just be sound a bit intellectual and a bit of a bit difficult to understand and comprehend. But that's the best I can do. Step 3 is an invitation to find a higher purpose, really, with the idea that after that, life becomes much easier. You just don't sweat the small stuff because you have a feeling like you're being pulled along for a greater purpose. You've handed over all of the minutiae, all of the trivia, all of the selfish wants and needs in return for awaiting your direction from some other force or some other power, which will become increasingly apparent. And in the next step 4, we will look at how to remove the things that are standing in the way of that, like resentments, fears, shame, boulders that jam up the stream of that force, if you like. So yeah, I hope that helps.